to be back in my hometown of Vancouver and to see people here interested in spirituality and addiction issues is a real treat. And I've been up here a couple times this year. How many people were at the International Harm Reduction meeting in May? Oh, not too many. That was really an exciting meeting for people interested in harm reduction approaches. And we had a conference in Seattle at the University of Washington right after the meeting up here in Vancouver on harm reduction psychotherapy. And we had people like Pat Denning, who's written this book. It's actually out here. I saw it on the book table on harm reduction therapy. And Andrew Tatarsky from New York City, who is also speaking on harm reduction approaches to therapy, especially for people with co-occurring disorders. We had Fred Rogers of Moderation Management, which is an internet-based program for people that want to moderate or reduce their alcohol consumption. And lots of people came to the meeting, especially people who are counselors and therapists, because there are many people out there who are otherwise shunted back and forth between the mental health services system and substance abuse treatment, and they often get caught in the middle. So we really need people that can handle, in an integrative way, people that are having both kinds of problems and are often active users because that's the only way they know how to cope with various problems with anxiety or depression or other mental health issues. So in harm reduction, they say, don't take a person's main coping strategies away until you have others in place. And there's many people that are needing this kind of help, and we were very excited by the program. We're going to have DVDs of the different talks available soon. If you're interested, we could get you more information about that. And then there'll be another harm reduction therapy meeting next year in Philadelphia. Then I was up here also at UBC for the Therapeutic Conversations number 7 conference. It was really very interesting. First time I've been to that. And I understand that's going to be happening here again next year as well. But anyway, I want to give thanks to people for inviting me here, Paul Wong and Jeff Thompson and Ken Hart in particular. And I'm going to talk about this program on Vipassana meditation or mindfulness meditation and how it can be used in the treatment of addictive behaviors. And this is a program that was done at a prison in Seattle called the North Rehabilitation Facility. And it was funded by a grant from the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism and the Fetzer Institute. And they had a special request for proposals a few years ago on spirituality as an approach for alcohol and drug treatment kinds of things. And Scott Tonigan, who's here, will be talking this afternoon, and his keynote was also funded on this same mechanism. So there was a lot of grants looking at 12-step programs, Alcoholics Anonymous. We were the only one that was looking at more like a Buddhist meditation approach to see how that would work. So the project is called Project Choices. One of the issues is how to get people who are having addiction problems, who are usually on automatic pilot in terms of the way they're conditioned to think about and use drugs, to get them to stand back and to kind of look at more what's happening rather than giving into it automatically. And in a way, mindfulness meditation is a method of being able to do that. To basically focus on your breath as the focus of awareness, and to, when you realize you're getting distracted by things, which could include urges or cravings to use, you return your attention to the breath so that you're able to observe the urges and cravings without automatically giving into them. And so that offers people a choice point. Whether or not to engage in the addictive behaviors becomes more of a choice than sort of an automatic process. And other people have talked about this as a pause, having a pause, interrupting otherwise binge behavior. So Jean Christeller, who's worked on mindfulness and how that can affect binge eating, is also looking at, just before the binge begins, if you could take a moment or two to do a sort of a micro meditation that gives you the choice of whether to go on or not. Of course, sometimes you will go on anyway, but you're more aware of the option of whether or not to do it. So I think it has a lot of implications for a variety of different addictive behaviors. So this, what happened, how this got started, I get a phone call from the psychologist at the prison in Seattle saying, you know, we've been doing these 10-day meditation retreats for a couple of years out here. It started in 1997. And we think that it's really having a big effect because we were looking at recidivism rates for inmates who took the Vipassana course. It was a voluntary course that they could take, so some inmates took it and others didn't. But comparing the ones who did take the course with those who didn't, there was a 40% reduction in recidivism rates over a 2-year period. So they began to realize something's going on here that seems like it's having a pretty big effect. But they weren't sure how people were changing in terms of their alcohol or drug use or other mental health problems. So they were very encouraged that this was a mechanism to get a grant to evaluate these programs and to look at not just recidivism, but relapse rates and drug and alcohol use rates and mental health variables and so forth. So we got the grant and we met with people at the prison. Ideally, it would have been good to do a randomized controlled trial where people could be randomly assigned to get the Vipassana or to be in the control group. But because this was a voluntary program, we were able to do a case match control. So we matched people that took the program with those who didn't take it on gender, on age, on criminal kinds of background problems. So we have a pretty good comparison, even though we can't control for the initial choice whether or not to take the program. So there had been work already in the literature around other kinds of meditations that have been used in correctional settings and other places as well for alcohol and drug problems. And really the first people on board were people doing transcendental meditation. And they have had a long interest in doing research studies, trying to see how effective this could be for alcohol or drug problems and getting pretty good results. Now that's how I got interested in meditation back in the 70s myself was my doctor told me that I had a kind of a borderline hypertension problem. Let's see how it goes. Anyway, so my doctor said I had a borderline hypertension problem. I needed to do something to relax, and I wasn't really doing things that were really lowering my blood pressure. So he suggested transcendental meditation. And I said, oh, come on, I'm a behavioral psychologist. You know, we're not interested in this strange stuff. So he hands me a reprint showing here's the effects of transcendental meditation on diastolic blood pressure, and it was a clear drop-off for people who practice on a regular basis. So I started to do it, and I did find, because you could measure your blood pressure after each session, that my diastolic blood pressure dropped about 10 points. And also, it was the most relaxing thing I had ever done. How many people here have done TM? Wow, quite a few. So pretty familiar with how it works in terms of 2 20-minute periods a day. You're given a mantra, so this is more of a Hindu-based meditation technique. The Maharishi taught the Beatles, as you will remember, how to do TM. And it's basically elicits a deep kind of relaxation state. Herb Benson's written this book, The Relaxation Response, saying this is really one of the things that's happening. And you can measure it physiologically and looking at different brain scans and so forth. There's a clear relaxation effect that's produced. So for people that are using alcohol or drugs as a way of self-medicating tension or anxiety, this can provide an alternative way of getting relaxed. And I would say that TM, I guess you would call it brief meditation therapy because it's the shortest version. Then there has been this work starting with John Kabat-Zinn on mindfulness-based stress reduction that he started at the University of Massachusetts Medical School to treat people with chronic pain problems who were not responding to traditional approaches. And his book if you haven't seen it, the first book of his is called Full Catastrophe Living, where he documents what this program actually does and all the instructions. And people can read through it and actually practice it based on what's in the book. His latest book is also very good, called Coming to Our Senses, that I would also recommend. And then one for clients, that if you want to introduce somebody to mindfulness, his book, Wherever You Go, There You Are, is a very good way of introducing the field. So his program, at least the way it's practiced now, is 8 sessions, 8 weekly group sessions over a 2-month period, followed by a day of sort of a mindfulness retreat that people can practice. And they're getting significant results, not only for chronic pain, but for psoriasis and other medical conditions. And it's now being practiced in hundreds of different hospitals and clinics around North America. And they offer a regular training program so you can learn how to do this and practice it in different settings if you're interested. Then here at University of Toronto, Zindel Siegel and his colleague John Teasdale, who's in England, decided to take the Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction and turn it into a relapse prevention program for depression called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And this is also showing itself to be effective in randomized controlled trials. They're getting results that are even better than more traditional cognitive therapy that Beck has developed in terms of reducing relapse rates among people that have already been treated for depression. So it's kind of an aftercare kind of program. So people have gone through regular treatment and then they can take the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy to help prevent relapse. So we just got a grant from the National Institute on Drug Abuse to develop a program that we're calling mindfulness-based relapse prevention. And we're patterning our program after Jon Kabat-Zinn and Zindel Siegel's program in that there will be 8 weekly meetings for groups of individuals who are interested in an aftercare or a maintenance program following intensive outpatient treatment for alcohol and drug problems in Seattle. This will be a randomized controlled trial. So they'll either get mindfulness-based relapse prevention or just a standard cognitive behavioral relapse prevention or a treatment as usual control group. And what we're doing right now is developing the treatment manual for mindfulness-based relapse prevention. So that should be available by the end of the summer if folks are interested. They could email us. I'll just give you my email address now in case you'd like any of these materials, or even the slides that we may not be able to get to see today anyway are available online. So that would be ABRC, stands for Addictive Behaviors Research Center, ABRC at u.washington.edu. So there was transcendental meditation, then there was mindfulness-based relapse prevention and cognitive therapy. Now what about Vipassana? And the program that we did, that we evaluated in the prison, this is a 10-day meditation retreat. So this is the most intense form of meditation because you're doing it every day starting about 4 o'clock in the morning through about 9 o'clock in the evening. And they alternate periods of sitting and walking meditation. The first 3 days, the course focuses on the breath as your focus of awareness. Like I was saying before, you pay attention to your breath when you realize you're distracted or things are coming up. Which in the prison, for a lot of the inmates who were taking the course, all kinds of things would be coming up. A lot of them had histories of physical and sexual abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, so strong emotional states would come up. And of course the instructions are pay attention to the feelings and the physical sensations associated with your reactions. So instead of trying to suppress them or avoid them or more typically go out and use drugs or alcohol as a way of trying to modulate the feelings, you're really trying to do more of a radical acceptance approach. Paying attention to it and allowing it to pass without giving in or trying to avoid or escape it. So this is very similar to what's being taught by Marsha Linehan, my colleague at the University of Washington, on her work on dialectical behavioral therapy. And she uses mindfulness, as you're familiar with this program, she calls it Wise Mind. And she has, these are for borderline personality disorder or folks that are at risk for suicide, getting them to use mini meditations, particularly at times when they're feeling overwhelmed or they're feeling completely depressed, to try and pay attention to how you're feeling on a moment-to-moment basis for a short period. So she has like 3-minute meditations and things like this. And the clients and patients that she's working with, also many of them are in correctional settings, are really showing strong benefits from this work. So mindfulness is included there. And then some of you may be familiar with acceptance and commitment therapy that Steve Hayes developed at the University of Nevada. And Steve has a kind of another big focus on acceptance and has had a conference on mindfulness. And there's a book out, I think Guilford Press did it, Mindfulness and Acceptance. We have a chapter in there, and there's lots of other chapters, and people are applying this in many different areas. So it seems to be a giant sudden swell of interest in mindfulness meditation and how it can be helpful for lots of these kinds of problems. So we did work in the past, back in the 70s and 80s, looking at transcendental meditation just for heavy college student drinkers, binge drinkers, to see if we taught them how to do this on a regular basis, how would this affect their alcohol consumption? So in the first study, we randomly assigned these binge drinking college students either to get transcendental meditation. This was taken from this book called Clinically Standardized Meditation by Patricia Carrington. And she basically took TM and made it available for therapists. So there's lists of mantras that you can pick rather than giving your assigned one from the teacher. So it's not the official TM, but it's sort of a clinical version of it. And there are tapes and things like that go along with it. So we taught the students how to do it on this basis. And then the other groups were in the progressive relaxation. So we did a muscle relaxation control group. So they did that 2 20-minute periods a day, or they just engaged in quiet reading as another control group, and then compared it with people that just kept track of their drinking. Anyway, so they practiced the meditation for 3 months, and then we did a 3-month follow-up. And we found that people on all 3 relaxation conditions, in the first 3 months, TM and the muscle relaxation and the quiet reading, showed significant reductions in daily and weekly alcohol consumption. About 40% less, actually. But in the follow-up period, really was only people that were doing the transcendental meditation. They were free to continue or not during the follow-up. Most of them continued. The other ones in the other conditions sort of stopped doing it, so their drinking went back up. So it seems that on a stress reduction sort of perspective, long-term effects of transcendental meditation seem particularly promising. So this 10-day Vipassana course would allow us to see what would be a much more intensive program and how would that affect alcohol and drug behavior. So what we did was we did a baseline interview with lots of measures of alcohol and drug use, a brief symptom inventory for mental health variables. We looked at drinking-related locus of control. We looked at positive psychology such as optimism scores, as well as recidivism rates, and et cetera. So we did a baseline interview, and then after the 10-day course, we did the measures again, and then we followed them up 3 months after they got out of prison. Let me explain a little bit about this prison. It's a minimal security prison called North Rehab Facility. It was very treatment rich. In other words, most of the people there were only there for a few months. There were a lot of DWI, drunk driver offenses, drug possession, prostitution, but no violent offenders. And they had a very rich treatment array of courses that people could take. There were 12-step groups available, parenting groups, kinds of stress management. There was some physical exercise groups. and then they included this 10-day meditation retreat as another option. So at first, when they did the meditation groups, not that many inmates were interested in going away for 10 days. Not really away. They had a special facility in the prison where they just moved to. So it was like their dormitory, and they had their food there and everything else, and that's where the course took place. But there was no opportunity to watch TV or read the newspaper or do email or anything like that, or smoke cigarettes. And so we thought there wouldn't the volunteer rate would be pretty small. And in the beginning it was. Only a few people decided to take it. But as time went by, since they started in 1997, the inmates who took the course said all these interesting things and how good it was for them and how it helped them so much. So more and more inmates started to sign up. And unfortunately, the state of Washington, because of budgetary problems, closed the prison about 2 years ago. But by then, they had people on the waiting list to take the meditation course. So clearly, it was having a big effect. And what they would do is they would teach the course separately for men. They'd have a men's class for 10 days, and then a few weeks later, they'd have a women's class, and they would go back and forth that way. And in the prison, there was maybe about 3 times as many men as women overall. And I told you what the most of the offenses were. Here's a little breakdown in terms of the demographics. It was 63% Caucasian, 10% Native American, 9% Latino, average age 37 years old, 58% were employed at least part-time prior to incarceration, 79% had the equivalent of a high school diploma, 58% reported they were Christian in terms of their religious belief, 17% had no formal religion, 25% were other religious groups. And one question that came up, and by the way, if we can't do the PowerPoint, we're going to do a video. Hopefully that'll work, right? Okay. Actually, what I'd prefer if we would rewind to the beginning of the video, because that'll make it. So we can't see, probably not going to be able to see the slides here, but we do have a little video that I want to show where you hear the inmates talking about what it was like for them. And there's what we're going to see a little bit later is like 7 women who took the meditation course, and they're giving us their opinions about it or their issues about it before they took the course and then afterwards. One of the issues that they brought up was, look, if this comes from a different religious background, in this case Buddhism, is this going to make it more difficult for me to, adhere to my Christian beliefs? And basically the message is, it doesn't really matter what your religious background is, but this is a technique or a procedure that can really help you deal with stress and to get more centered with yourself. And it can be very consistent with Christian beliefs. And there's apparently a Christian technique called centering prayer. People have heard about this? It seems very similar to meditation in that you're sitting there, you're repeating a sacred word to yourself, but you're allowing whatever comes in, presumably the voice of God or whatever. So it's a similar kind of strategy and seems to be very helpful. So I think the main message is, no, this isn't going. We're not trying to turn you into Buddhists here. And in fact, the whole issue about how to describe where this all came from keeps coming up at different professional meetings. So people like Steve Hayes says, look, this is cognitive therapy. We don't need to say anything about Buddhism here. Because if we do, people are going to leave, because it sounds too strange. So let's just talk about it as metacognition and as something that we can empirically validate. And John Kabat-Zinn, even though he learned it all basically in Buddhist classes, feels the same. So we should just talk about this as a stress reduction course. I'm not so sure, because since I've become much more into Buddhist psychology and have done a number of retreats, it seems to me that what Buddhism has to say about things like addiction are very parallel to what we're talking about in cognitive behavioral therapy. They're talking about the behavior of the mind. They're talking about things like skillful means. Hello, that sounds just like what our focus on coping skills. We're talking about cravings as one of the major features of ego attachment, and that's what gets us into problems with this thing in the first place. So that's very similar to outcome expectancies and things that we're looking at, psychological dependency and cognitive behavioral treatment. So CBT and mindfulness, I think, have a lot to offer each other, and that I think we're going to see more integration of these two approaches as we go along. So let me just briefly overview the results, and then hopefully we can do the video next in a couple minutes. Okay. So basically, we don't have the slides, but what we're finding is significant effects for people that took the meditation course compared to the people that didn't take it in the case match control group for the following variables. Crack cocaine use from baseline to 3-month follow-up. Both groups actually showed a decline in crack use because there were lots of other treatment programs that were available in the prison. But those who also took the meditation group showed a significant decrease in crack cocaine use compared to the control group. This was also true for tobacco use. And most of them were, not all of them, but a lot of them were pretty heavy smokers. So that showed a significant reduction. Also in peak weekly alcohol use and alcohol-related negative consequences, things like blackouts, getting into fights, passing out, things like that showed a significant reduction. And we showed a drop in the overall scores for the brief symptom inventory. So particularly depression showed significant decrease, even more for the people that took the Vipassana course. They showed a significant increase in optimism about their future lives, whereas the control group showed a drop-off at 3 months. So they were getting less optimistic, and the Vipassana people were getting more optimistic. And then we also had a significant shift in drinking-related locus of control. This is similar to internal-external locus of control in general, but specifically for drinking. This is Dennis Donovan's measure. So there was a significant shift for people that took the Vipassana towards more internal locus of control. So they had more of a sense that they were having more choice and more responsibility about their drinking. So let's see if we could show the video now, hopefully. And this is a short video. It's 20 minutes, so that should give us a few minutes at the end for some questions. But let's see how this works. It's called Changing from the Inside.
Vipassana is a word from the ancient Indian language, Pali. It means to see things as they really are. Vipassana dates back more than 2,500 years, yet its relevance and value to modern society is undiminished. Through its practice, people from all walks of life and backgrounds work to transform their lives. They bring balance and peace into an otherwise tumultuous existence. But Vipassana is not an easy journey or a quick fix. It's not the sort of thing most prisoners would want to take on to pass the time. Yet some choose to.
I think this can have a beneficial effect if for no other reason than it really is a form of mental boot camp. And if you are of the mind that what offenders need is to learn how to discipline themselves, to learn about themselves, to learn a moral code, and to practice that moral code, and to be willing to endure difficulty and discomfort in order to achieve that. If you're of that belief, this is what you want to do.
NERF is a minimum security facility operated by the King County Health Department under contract with the Department of Adult Detention. Beyond incarceration, NERF seeks to provide inmate treatment with a focus on drug and alcohol abuse.
How many are in jail either directly or indirectly because of alcohol and drug use?
There are also classes on smoking cessation, self-esteem, critical thinking, emotional literacy, high school equivalency and vocational training, even acupuncture and Tai Chi. Inmates here are called residents, and they enjoy many personal privileges not granted in other jail facilities. There are no cells, no walls, no guns, no lockups. Many King County inmates think the time spent here will be easy time, But facility administrator Lucia Major and her staff have something else in mind.
Okay.
We try to keep every resident here occupied with some meaningful activity. Now, there's always those who can just do the minimum. But after they've been here for a while, we're going to start to pressure them to get involved, either in work and vocational activities or treatment activities or both. And typically they do.
I've participated in family groups and in parenting class, and the NA class, and AA class, and critical thinking, and acupuncture. I almost did almost all of them. And I've already tried to go to treatment 2 times, but, I never completed it. I always left, and now this time, I'm taking more advantage of it and learning a lot more about myself.
Attention all residents, need the door monitors.
Dean McGuire is head of security at NERF, a veteran with 20-plus years as a corrections officer. If anyone harbors few illusions about the likelihood of change in this population, it's Dean.
If you want people to change themselves, if you want inmates to stop being inmates and to become productive citizens, I believe that the residents, inmates it's on them. And what we can do is provide a way for them to look at themselves, to look at their cravings, and to try to change what's wrong.
Typically, retreats are held at one of the more than 45 Vipassana centers worldwide. Of paramount importance during a course is strict silence, called noble silence, when maintained for the purposes of introspection. On a course, any sources of distraction, books, TV, radio, phones, or mail, are all eliminated.
I felt at the time that all the inmates would just drop out, that they would not participate. They would not give up smoking. They would not give up their commissary, their visits, their mail, their television, their telephones, and their talking for 10 days. When I was told that, I said, well, I don't think so. But I said, heck, go ahead,
To maintain noble silence and minimize distractions, prisoners on a course need to be housed separately from other non-course inmates. They require their own dormitory, their own vegetarian diet, even their own exercise area. All of this presented a daunting challenge to the NERF staff.
Okay, guys, line up on the left-hand side of the wall.
As a direct supervision facility, NERF depends on over 20 compulsory head counts a day. In contrast, and potentially conflict, a meditation course relies on minimal distractions and interruptions. How then could a Vipassana course be conducted without compromising security?
We had to somehow integrate security right into the program. And fortunately, Ben Turner, who is jail personnel, was able to be the program manager, and with help from our security managers here, he was able to take on a lot of the responsibility for calling in the head counts, and he could also make sure that he's accustomed to observing behaviors and intervening in a timely way before they become a problem. So it became necessary to have that component. We also needed a lot of cooperation from security because it meant that they would have to also monitor periodically what was going on there, which meant leaving the usual perimeter within which they operate and making a special trip over there and understanding what was going on and being of minimal intrusiveness.
4 other women coming in who are old students.
At their own request, the next course was arranged for women inmates. Despite their interest, some of the women have strong apprehensions. Their concerns range from the spiritual
because I am concerned about it being outside of the realm of God
to the mundane.
You have to sit still the whole entire time? No, you're sitting in meditation for up to an hour at a time.
So when you're actually meditating.
Kathy Henry, a Vipassana assistant teacher, will be the manager of the women's course.
Throw everything away that you read in that book about any religion. Anything you read
The
about
words of
Buddha
Richard Jimerson, an ex-resident who took the first course, have a profound effect on the women. Some of them know him from the streets and are struck by the evident changes they see.
My mom went down to take a course. So if my mom went, you know that it's got to have something to it because she works in a Christian church.
Fears about conversion to another religion may persist until one actually takes a 10-day Vipassana course and sees for oneself what it is and what it is not.
Questions at all, I'd be happy to answer.
In the end, 7 women sign up for the 10-day Vipassana course. They have all been in and out of jails, some for most of their adult lives. Their typical crimes are theft, prostitution, shoplifting, drug dealing, and assault. Most of them have an alcohol or drug abuse problem. Most of them have children.
Right before I came in, I was in a really bad way. I was a heroin addict and pretty close to death. It was bad. And I was tired of that, and I kicked, and that was hell. And I knew that if I went back out there, that I might not make it, very much longer. So I knew that I had to do something. And that's what brought me to the stages of change. And at first I tried to lie, I tried to kid, because I was afraid. I was afraid to uncover things within myself that I've been running from all my life. But they just kept persevering, and finally I just became not submissive, but I surrendered. It was exciting to me to keep finding all these new things about myself. But yet I still had some issues, and I still have some issues that need to be addressed, and they have to be addressed by me and only me. And when I went, I was chosen by the staff to go to the coming out ceremony for the men. And a couple of the men I knew from the streets, and they were what they consider themselves soldiers, And I couldn't believe the change that I had seen from that moment, I knew that I wanted to do this.
Hour after hour, though they sat together, each woman fought her own separate battle. The course was no less difficult for them than it was for the men. The challenge of remaining detached and balanced, despite the intensity of the experience, at times seemed overwhelming.
I saw dramatic results in the inmates that participated in the meditation. I saw honesty. I saw these residents being honest about themselves. I saw them being very open and also not bothered by the rules. The rules were okay. Everything was just. And I don't mean they were all tranquil. I don't mean that. They weren't necessarily tranquil. They were just okay with stuff. The security staff was here for a reason. The rules were here for a reason. That was what made me see that there was some real change there. Because some of these people were behavior problems before they went into meditation. They weren't when they came out.
Almost to a man, there was something behind their eyes that you couldn't get in. There was like this curtain hanging. And then when the course was over, you could see inside. I can't say what the course did for each of them for the rest of their lives, but in 10 days, you could see inside them. They were there. You could see that they were there, whereas before they weren't there. You couldn't see them. And I really think that the women will be able to do that too, particularly the women we got going through the course this time. I think that that to be able to see them is going to be really marvelous.
There was a wager among some security staff over how many women would actually complete the course. No one bet on all 7. But on the 10th day, when course participants can break their silence, 7 women residents emerged, successful. Yet despite all appearances, these were not the same women that started the course a week and a half earlier. There was something perceptibly different about them. Maybe it was that you could see them now, and they could see themselves.
I love myself today. I do.
Kind of a unusual feeling.
It's a wonderful feeling. And these tears are really tears of happiness. They really are. Because the woman that I was in battle with all my life. And I've learned to love her today. And it feels wonderful. And Vipassana did that for me.
Wow.
And I was really kind of fearful. But the things that came up for me were not the things that I was fearing would come up. Or maybe because of the technique involved, I was able just to really handle it, you know. And it was things that I'd been running from all my life. And it was just right there in my face, and I had to look at it, observe, you know, and let it go. And I've been able to do that. And it really, I mean, there's such a peace and such a weight lifted. I can't tell you.
And all my counselors, anyone I've ever have talked to, has always said, Carol, you're in your head. You know, get inside. And so last time I was here and in my sobriety, I've really tried to work on that. And this was, you know, definitely an experience where you're inside. You're feeling the sensations. When I get into a tense situation, even just within the dorm, when situations, I've come in a couple of confrontations with people, and it's like, okay, how am I really feeling? What's going on inside? Where's, you know, the heart's beating faster? Just real conscientious of that. So when I get in those situations on the outside, I know that it'll all pass. In 94, I had my dad and my sister pass away 6 days apart. Since then, I felt... just, there's been a lot of pain, a lot of sadness, a lot of guilt, a lot of wondering, you know, why, questions, and then just things about me, and I've really, you know, when I was here last time, I did a lot of grief work, and that, was very beneficial to me, and it just so happens that tomorrow, March 7th, my dad would have turned 75 years old if he was still here. So this is kind of it's been real spiritual for me as well, because I know that this is, he'd be very proud.
My name is Velma Waina. I felt overwhelmed, you know, over everything that happened. You know, I mean, I felt so many feelings, negative and positive, and it changed me. It really did. I mean, when I first came to jail, you know, I mean, it was just like any other time that I came to jail. You know, I mean, when this time's over, you know, I can't wait to get back outside, because when I get back outside, I'm going to go back and do the same thing, you know. But before I go on, you know, with more, I want to tell my mom, you know, how grateful I am that she's here with my son and her husband, and I'm really grateful that he brought me into this world, and I'm happy that I'm alive today, you know. I really am. I mean, God, you know, before I thought, man, I mean, when I was, you know, out getting high and drinking, you know, I mean, I thought that's the way to die, you know. I mean, this is the way I'm going to die, you know. I'm going to die of an overdose, I mean, because that's the way it was, you know. I mean, you never thought about how good life could be when I went through this course, that's what it made me look at, that you could get through them bad times. You don't have, like me, I didn't have to go out and use drugs or go out and get drunk or just go out and do whatever I wanted. And now I could, I don't have to go out and get high and go get a beer or whatever, I could face it, I don't have to, say, oh, well, forget it, and let's just go get drunk or let's go get high, and, it don't fix anything. I noticed that, I thought it did, but it don't. And all that stuff that I had, all that misery that I had, it came out. And I felt really, I felt good. I mean, I didn't know I was that miserable, but I was pretty miserable.
Let's go right here where the flowers are. Right here. Okay.
7 women, not 6, not 5, but 7. Soft as a flower, hard as a rock.
I think when you see something, a group like this getting the results that it seems to be getting, and I understand it's still early and, we're still waiting on the results. But what I saw, the immediate result was less behavior problems. Well, that's enough for me.
A lot of the recovery efforts that these women have made in the past have been very sincere efforts, and sometimes with the thought that if I just try hard enough, it will happen. If I listen to the experts closely enough and do everything that they say, then I won't feel these cravings anymore. I won't get swept up in this lifestyle anymore. I won't make these dumb decisions anymore. And if it were just a matter of effort and desire, they would all be better, because it only takes a few times to jail, one time to lose your children, a few times to get beaten up by a John or something of that nature, to know that that's not what you want, and to begin trying. So it wasn't that these women hadn't made efforts, and it was that they didn't have a way. And Vipassana gave them a way. It gave them a tool. It gave them a choice. Now, I'm not for a minute saying that they will always make the right choice from now on, but they have a choice now, and they didn't have one before.
What I got out of this course, though, was how to deal without reacting, because I was a person who just reacted off any little thing set me off. And another good thing I'd learned about that I'm taking out of here is craving good or bad, and just the tools I got out of the course is just going to stick with me for the rest of my life now. And I'm glad I did it.
So, well, at least we got to see what some of the people had to say, and it seems to be pretty consistent with what the theory would seem to suggest, maybe mediating some of these effects. Certainly much more acceptance of negative emotional states. The gal who says, when I get into a situation in the dorm, I pay attention to my heart rate, how it's feeling, I know that this is going to pass. And in fact, one of my graduate students, Sarah Bowen, has done some work looking at mediational factors that may be associated with some of these good changes that we're seeing in Vipassana. And what we're finding is that there's a lot, looking at the white bear suppression inventory sorts of things, that there's a lot more acceptance of negative emotions and of urges or cravings and less attempt to kind of suppress them. That seems to be part of what's going on. And that was true for both alcohol use and alcohol consequences. So thought avoidance, there's less thought avoidance and less rebound effects that we're trying to see there. This is similar to, we have this technique that we're building into the mindfulness-based relapse prevention called urge surfing, where you imagine that when you're having a strong urge, it's sort of like an ocean wave that starts to build up. And of course, people sometimes think that if they don't give in to the urge, it's just going to get stronger and wipe them out or whatever. So this procedure is to use your breath as a surfboard while the urge is passing through you. So you're paying attention to it, but you're trying to keep your balance rather than getting wiped out by it, and then until it goes down the other side. And these sorts of meditation imagery techniques seem to be pretty helpful. The Vipassana course that they were showing here doesn't really specifically have any information in it about how to deal with alcohol or drug problems. It's more dealing with cravings and emotional reactions and physical sensations in general. It's a very powerful way to learn mindfulness, but people are saying, well, how can we have therapists teach people meditation skills without sending them to a 10-day course? It would be great if they could go, but many people just aren't going to be able to do that. And also, you have to be a specially trained Vipassana teacher to be an assistant teacher under Goenka's course, which is the course that they did in the prison. So our program will be more, therapists will be able to teach some basic meditation techniques like they do in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. We encourage the therapists to practice meditation themselves for 30 to 40 minutes a day, because that's what we're asking the clients to do as part of their homework session. But the way that groups work is the first 40 minutes, there will be some meditation instructions. We're also trying to integrate some yoga techniques into it. I've been working most recently with a Buddhist teacher named Reginald Ray, who's done this course called Meditating with the Body. It's really has been a very powerful course, and it helps you deal with strong emotional states and other kinds of things that both integrate yoga and sitting meditation. So we're going to probably include some of that in our mindfulness-based relapse prevention course. So there'll be 40 minutes or so of sitting, and then the rest of the 2-hour or 2.5-hour meeting per week would be, okay, well, how would you use this to deal with relapse issues? Recognizing early warning signals, looking at your own expectancies and issues about what's happening cognitively, looking at strong physical urges and learning a new way to cope with them. So hopefully we'll be able to evaluate that and get the manual out for people that would like to integrate mindfulness meditation into some of their work. So we're encouraged, and it seems like this is something that more and more people are having access to, and hopefully will help people deal with some of these problems in the future. So thank you.